Okay, so we're gonna kind of have a slight change of energy tonight because as I was talking to my mother here, I was telling her I want to kind of like target people that are slightly a little more senior than me. I don't want to use the term older, but like slightly, a little bit more my senior, and just target people, just a different crowd in general. It's not even really about age, but it is going to be kind of like some, I guess, for some people, a little bit of like radical information, not too radical, but kind of radical, and it might be some stuff even for some wars out there, and that's what I want to kind of talk about before I get into it. That may be a little bit challenging because I know some wars don't believe that like wars are like into aliens and
Right.
and wars are like into cloning and like they think that Prophet Noble Drelly didn't talk about this type of stuff. They'll like even shun you and say no, that's like some Yorkie stuff, Dr. Malachi York stuff, get that stuff out of here or whatever. So like it's a lot of politics with that, like especially amongst our people like melanated complexion. I mean, I really don't like using the term black, but I mean I use it, in some of my videos and stuff like that for different purposes. Me, because I understand like some people are wrapped up into that, on the scientific level. But of course, it's more. They say, well, you're not supposed to use it, but I'm not like a religious or, So just wanted to kind of like interview her, and like what I want to do is like I want to interview her from a perspective of like like of my senior, and trying to like see how people like in her age category kind of look at some of these what I may consider wild concepts, to kind of see like how far out I may be to some people or whatever, like and just us as a group as star seeds or whatever, like is this really like can we like some kind of way like merge with our elders, because like a lot of times we're like pushed away and stuff like that by our family and our parents and stuff like that for believing in this stuff. And then too, you got the religious thing. Like I said, like I mean, growing up, like I was kind of like grew up in like Islam and being a war and all this type of stuff. And it's like you're not supposed to believe in certain stuff and all of that. So we're just trying to kind of like break the barriers with that, like through this interview or whatever. That's what I want to kind of try to do, and just kind of try to see, like what she thinks about certain things when it comes to cloning. And that's what we're gonna be like kind of mainly focusing on. And the threat is like what I really want to kind of get and then paint a picture of the threat, of this cloning and like where it could really lead to as far as the problem of this cloning. Because I don't think people really see that this is a warfare strategy, like with this cloning or whatever. Like it's really a hard war. They're declaring war on really the human race, like in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like with this cloning, with this X technology is what I call it too. And I don't know if people in this other, generation really knows about a lot of this. So I'll just start off the interview and just ask my mother because like I mean she's very conscious or whatever. So like we have all kind of conversations. We're just making this public, but like so like where did you first hear about cloning from?
Well, first of all, let me introduce myself. As your mother, I'm more Sheikess through the Moore Science Temple. And Auset, I'm known as Auset, Sheikess, more Empress, more Sheikess, Auset. And I first learned about
Make sure you talk
cloning.
up sometime because I don't know if the camera will pick
Oh
that
yeah, cloning to me, I've always thought as a child something was wrong with humans. I mean, that's the best way to say it always, because I had, your grandparents, who are my parents, they taught me a lot about to make me think outside the box. A lot. I always had a lot of questions as a child too. I hope this video will be helpful to a lot of people of all ages because we're at that time now. So I first found out. I always thought, like I said before, as a child, that people were not different as far as racial or anything like that. Because I think we spend too much on the racism, the racial thing. That's the problem. Cloning to me, as a concept that I've studied, goes back as far as the ancient Egyptians and even far back than that, as far as with the beings that were called the Anunnaki. And from that, the Egyptians came out of that. The Babylonian, Samaria, all of those different areas. That's where the cloning was took part in, and the cloning was made. All various types of humans came out of cloning. So that was my first, I guess I say, introduction with the ancient Egyptians, because they used the priests were known as the Wabs. Back then, that was their name, and they used the Wabs. They believed in coming back. They believed in the afterlife, which most melanated groups do, that we study about all over the world, all over the country. there is life after so-called death. We just transitioning on. So cloning is, I guess, a way that they wanted to say they were here and they were going to stay here. To me, we may think they're gone, but then that other clone, what's left, is still there. So,
Right.
as I stated before, it started with the ancient Egyptians. That was left on their walls. They showed the cloning process, how the pharaohs believed in the afterlife. They left their artifacts with them inside the pyramids. These are some things Noble Ali saw, so I know that in my heart he was aware of cloning. I know that. I believe Noble Ali, our prophet. And of course, the other ones that came after him, they talked about it too. But like I said, we all came out of cloning. I think that's the thing that they feared because we were here first, as always. We have to tell the truth. We were here as melanated people, and we came through a cloning process because they needed the humans to do labor and work here. And so they came as spiritual beings, but they wanted to create something out or make something out of themselves. And that's the part that goes into the old Bible or the scripture, the so-called Genesis, quote unquote, where they start there.
Because I know, like, people like to hear facts, like they want to know, like, so, like, is this something like I can go online and research and things like that? So, like, but like from your generation perspective, like, where did you first hear about this? Like, did you hear about this when you were a child? Like,
no, I really started learning about
just
this.
the word cloning, the idea of it, period.
Well, let me say, my dad, your grandfather, he was in the military World War II, so he would drop little small hints. I'm not going everything's as personal, but he would say things happened as far as when he was in the military, because he stayed there about 8 or 9 years, and he would. I knew it was something going on as far as these space programs. He would go in some of that, but he would stop because I guess some things he couldn't really discuss. But that always made me wonder that there was life after death, where he would talk about some things my mom would say.
But outside of him, there was no real like television or nothing.
Oh yeah, television. I was just going to get into that.
Television back in
as far as the old movies, me and the sister were talking about that the other day. How they had the Frankenstein that deals with cloning. Me and a couple of sisters talking about it. We had a meeting last week and they were talking about that. I said, remember the old movies and they had the Frankenstein and how the doctor, he invented him and he cloned him. He took that body, the old ones they show. Yeah, that's your dad be talking about that. Your grandpa said, well,
what year was that?
Talking about World War II or something.
What year did Frankenstein?
This was like back in I guess the middle, I'll say about in the mid 60s. This is around 64, 63, something like that. We were allowed to stay up on the weekends and watch the old shock theaters where they showed all the horror films and everything. And then even with some of the old Tarzan movies, they would show Johnny Weissmuller, the so-called European that was in Tarzan in the midst of the jungles of so-called Africa, Al-Kabilan as we call it. He was always saving these so-called women that were part of the jungle. They were like always portrayed as melanated women. He'd save them from these evil witch doctors. They would show that. Then that made me think about there was some type of afterlife too, because they would be honored. They would show the Africans, even though they're really at that time they were really Europeans with painted faces portraying these parts back in the early 60s. I want to remind that too. But they knew the truth. That shows that they knew where these things started from over, in our birthright, through our background. Okay. So yeah, a lot of the horror shows.
So that's a good.
The werewolf movies, all of these kind of things. The Aquaman, and coming up, the Gill Man.
So that helps me to understand like how people in your generation will look at, some of this stuff with clone or whatever. So
right.
Let's try to help the listening audience to kind of understand like what is cloning, because like I actually looked it up. And like they didn't really have a lot of information on there, because at first I was like, well, I'm going to be on here like talking about this. It kind of sounded like I don't have a lot of research, so let me go try to, like get my credentials together, thinking I was going to go on here and find all of this stuff. And they're very vague about all of this. To be honest with you, it's really sad because I don't think they should be, because it's very dangerous. So I'll get into that in a minute, but like they're just really vague about it. Like they don't really have a lot of information on a lot about like what it is. So like cloning is like kind of like duplicating. Or dubbing, really, it's the same thing. It's like the concept of like if you was to duplicate a tape or a CD or whatever, like even this video, like the concept, this is cloning, believe it or not. Like this is like a version of cloning. I'm going to talk about cyborgs in a minute too. Actually, we're going to cover that too.
Right.
So like this is kind of like cloning too. So I just want to kind of throw that out there too. So like a lot of people, they don't really know like what it is or whatever. Like they don't even know like what cloning is. So it's just like a form of like duplicate. Like you can clone an arm, you can clone a
Right.
cell, you
A
can call them,
human and
yeah,
stem cell
human, you can call it
research.
full animal, or something like that. So,
Yeah, the sheep that started under George Bush, they start saying they
right.
cloned the sheep back in what was that, the 90s, the late 80s, to make you think, oh, this is a new concept. But like you said, it was way they've been new about it. They just still trying to keep it kind of spooky. They don't teach about a lot unless you can take a few classes in, college. But then they're still not going. The professors are, because that's the way they're trained in West civilization. They're not going to go into it really, really deeply. Like the only two I've studied besides some of the stuff my father told me was Zachariah Sitchin has talked about it, and but he takes it from all the way back to the civilization too, as well as Dr. Malachi's York did talked
So
about that in some of their
I know your
writings.
father. You say your father was in the military, so that's pretty much like. I mean, my grandfather. Of course, I know this, but I'm presenting this to the
Right,
audience.
exactly.
Like, was in the military, so that's where you gained a lot of this top secret information.
As we were watching the TV, then he started reminiscing about some of the things. He said, "I can't tell you everything," he would say, but he would say, "Oh yeah," he said they did some things like in the military. And he would like kind of stop when we was watching these movies, and I said, "Oh, did that happen to you, Dad?" And he got kind of quiet about it, and I would ask him. He said, "You're going to find out a lot more as time go on, But I'm just letting you know there were things that did go on in the military that I can't really speak of right now." Yet people tell me. But I know when we would watch these movies together, we all sit down as a family. My mom, I guess it would make him think about different things that he had went through, maybe some type of experiments
So,
he
like,
himself
do you remember, like, in school, that, like, other children have, like, conversations like this with their parents back then?
Oh no, definitely
So,
not.
like, obviously, like, he was, like, on some top secret
Right,
stuff.
even as exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I want to
too.
kind of, like, just
Yeah.
to, like, I don't try to make, like, like, my bloodline exclusive. I just want to kind of see, like, what other people. I mean, I'm sure people leave in the comments too, like, they got grandparents that probably involved in deep stuff as we read the comments.
And that's what they hand down the history.
So I'm not saying like we're the only ones, but like,
right,
I think the people that was involved in the military, if they got family that was like had held posts, they knew about this stuff and they were serious. I'm gonna talk to you guys.
That's when it first came out.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to you guys about some of the stuff that I found, but I really want to interview her because that's what this is really truly about. And like I had like a few more questions or whatever. So like as far as UFOs, like getting into that because this goes into cloning as well, so that's why we have to address UFOs. So like where was the first time? Like, what are your ideas on UFOs? Do you believe in UFOs?
Oh, definitely. Oh yeah, I've been experiencing UFOs since I was a child. Like just different, just kind of like unexplainable. But even as a child, I say right around 6 or 7. I was experiencing unidentified flying objects in a way that I would see things like off in the sky, I would see like strange things up in the sky, but I really couldn't really like comprehend what it was. But I knew it was something
like as a kid
out
you would
there.
See these things?
Right, I would see these things. Wow. And see it at that time they were
like even back then
talking about going to the moon and all that type of thing. And then like I said, my father being in the military, he would always drop a few seeds about different things, And I was just always knew that there was a extra life out beside of him, and I already knew that, in my heart, my soul, just by just the life that I led with having parents that told me a lot about our birth line and our background and where we came from. So that always sparked my mind. And then sometimes I would buy these certain. They had like actual board games that I would buy because me and sister was talking about that a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this game that was called Green Ghost, and it actually talked about the paranormal. I would like it, those kind of games. We've been heard saying that. So remember this game? Say Green Ghost. Remember you had the cards. You had to cut the lights off, and then kind of like a seance. It was like a card game where Kresge, also the amazing Kresge, was around back then too. I don't know if people have heard of him. He was a forerunner. The amazing Kresge, yes. He was more so like a David Copperfield of our time.
Oh, so Amazing Kresge was like a performer or something.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so all of that was like spiritual occultism. And then you had the older movies too. What was that one about them? He was talking about They Live.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, They Live.
14 minutes, huh? And I just want to make sure I get enough information because we're gonna stop this in like 20 minutes, and I don't know how this is gonna go. This is the first of hopefully many. We get a decent amount of exposure with this there's just a few other concepts I want to get out, like while we got a few minutes
Yeah, so like,
to kind of
yeah,
address. So like,
yeah.
so pretty much like as we kind of see, like this whole thing is really like kind of top secret.
Right.
And there's
It's
a lot of
always
other
been.
levels to it, like. And
Yeah, that's why as I gradually start studying.
like I know you as a woman don't know much about like Freemasonry, and that's something that I kind of want to introduce here to your generation or whatever. But like you as a woman,
I've studied a lot of that.
yeah, but I
now.
know like it's supposed to be like this male order or
Not
whatever.
I know
So,
everything.
like, right, I know like
Yeah.
people don't know everything that they're into, but it's dangerous. Some of this stuff, like I'll just say that I'm not saying it's even just with Freemasons, but a lot of secret societies have it's like cloning going on really bad within these secret societies. I'll just say that.
Oh, yeah.
And
I can see that.
I'll say that like from my research, like even in the scientific communities or whatever, there were several different points and like periods of time where like people were like totally like kind of wiped out and cloned and replaced. And that's why I'm kind of asking you like from your memory, like what you can remember back. Like you said, this kind of started it was like a '60s time, like during the '60s, a lot of stuff came out about cloning or whatever. So you couldn't really like probably go back to the '40s, but like from
only for what my parents told.
Yeah, but your parents told you a lot about the '40s. But from my research, something took place in 1941.
Yeah,
it took place, and it was
he was in a service then, I think.
And there was some deep scientists, and they was like into some real deep like sciences or whatever, and they decided to go into this project, and they invested and like made like and pretty much like invested into clones. And like some of the like popular people in our day and time, like these people that became celebrities and stuff like that, didn't just become celebrities by happenstance. These were people's like slaves. Like this is the dangerous part. So like basically what I'm saying is like they would like essentially from my research, I was researching some of this on the dark web for people want to know like, where you get this from or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this like with the dark web, like what it does is it kind of like takes like a ticker of like anything that took place digitally, like cameras, recordings, anything like that took place over all the years, whatever, with digital recordings. They got like records and stuff like that on the dark web, so you could go back and like look at old records and stuff. And I seen old records of what I'm telling you about. So some of this stuff is really top secret. And it's like like they had. It was a group of scientists that cloned groups of people, like people that became celebrities. And like, I can go very specific, and hopefully in future videos,
study on that too.
We can talk more about it as I like, educate you on it. But this is just something I kind of want to introduce to people in your generation, like the threat of like what some of these guys are into in these secret societies or whatever. And they're doing cloning like as a business though, and it's like
they're doing it now,
high level business or whatever, and it's going on or whatever. And it's like you got to be careful because even. Not to scare anyone, but it's like it could get serious to where like someone next to you could be a clone or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And we didn't really give you a chance to even talk about cyborgs. I guess we'll have to talk about that.
I mean, you could talk a little
on the next episode. Nah, time is right now. I don't like to just do it.
Drop, little few seeds on the cyborg.
Yeah, time is running out, but and I really wanted to ask you more questions. So like, what we probably gonna do is definitely like have you definitely come back. Like on a consistent basis and do.
Oh yeah, it's like I said, I want to reach
like a kind of like a generation of try to bring together like a generational timeline so we can kind of see like where did this stuff like these different breaks in our memory or whatever.
That's good for the youth to know.
They don't want us to know how many times they've wiped us out. Really,
it's good for the older people and the youth to come together now.
And there's a lot of information out there. I don't want to go too deep into it, but definitely. The real message that I just want to put out is that they definitely like clone and they definitely buy and sell people and clone and do this type of stuff. And a lot of it is like replacing family members and stuff like that, even in families and stuff like that. And cloning people you won't know because this technology is so superb and they got it.
Oh yeah, definitely cleansing. Definitely cleansing.
Like you were saying, ancestors anyways.
Right, and it's just refined it. Some of it's for the good, a lot of it is like you're saying negative. A lot of it's being done right under people's eyes. They're being entertainment, political wise.